Let's go to our panel now. In The Hague is ICC spokesman Fadi El Abdallah. Also in The Hague is the principal lawyer for the victims in the case, Paolina Massidda. And in London is the founder of the news site Africa Briefing, Jonathan Offei. Ansah, I thank you all for joining us on The Newsmakers. Paolina, let me start with you. Laurent Gbagbo is an innocent man, according to the International Criminal Court right now. How do you feel about that?
Well, maybe the right question is how victims feel about that. There was, of course, a great deception on the side of the victims at the announcement of acquittal of both accused. Certainly something that it was completely unexpected. And now, of course, victims are also facing the possibility that both accused be released, even without conditions.
Fadi El Abdallah, tell me why Gbagbo was found not guilty for crimes against humanity.
Well, we are speaking about a decision at the trial level. It's a trial chamber that found by majority that the prosecutor did not present sufficient evidence to demonstrate the responsibility of Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Gbagbo for the crimes as charged. There is still a possibility to appeal that. Once the written decision is filed, then the prosecutor may decide to appeal the current decision to the appeals chamber.
So, Fadi, for those who would say that the man was in the dock for a long, long time and he was detained for 8 years, yet he was found to be not guilty in the end, as a former sitting head of state, does it damage the credibility of the court at all?
I think the credibility of the court and of any other court is actually demonstrated by the respect of this court itself to the rules and to the legal applicable rules, legal texts, and the elements of evidence that are there. What has been demonstrated is that the court respects fully the rights of the defense and also the applicable rule. Whether the decision of the trial chamber itself has errors or not, that might be challenged before the appeal chamber of the ICC itself, which is another guarantee of the fairness of the proceedings. So I think the whole matter is to be perceived as in the context of the whole procedure and the whole case that is still ongoing. The court has demonstrated that there are different checks and balances, independent and impartial judges, and the possibility to respect both the rights of the defense, the rights of the victims, and ultimately also to appeal to a bench of 5 other judges.
Jonathan, what does this acquittal mean?
Well, it means that actually the court, has respected, the rights of the accused, and again, also it means that the victims, the around 27 victims, who were participating in the trial at The Hague, are going to be denied, their compensation, due to the acquittal, because when the current president Alassane Ouattara came into power, I think 2012 or so, I mean, he set up a commission of inquiry and Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and also other measures to compensate the victims. But because of this acquittal, if the acquittal is upheld, that means that the victims might not be entitled to any compensation at all.
That's interesting. So let me bring that up and go to Paolina with that. So Paolina, especially since you represent them, right? So clearly, just because the court has said that Gbagbo is acquitted and Blay as well, and if Gbagbo and Blay are released, clearly somebody still killed the people who were killed, the family members of those who want justice and redress. Do they have anywhere else to turn if Gbagbo and Blay are seen as innocent men?
Well, first of all, I'd like to make some comments on what Jonathan was saying, because actually it's not really correct. This decision is not final. I think it's very important to say that. The decision on acquittal is not final. This is an appellable decision. The prosecution will appeal it, which means that at this point in time, the rights of victims to compensation and reparations remain intact, at least until the appeals chamber will rule on the matter. This also means that for victims, there is still an avenue to get the request of justice heard before the ICC. And this goes, of course, to your question, who should then pay if Gbagbo and Blay are not declared guilty. At this point in time, it's true, they are considered innocent. There is a first ruling, but it's not the final ruling.
Fadi El Abdallah, Gbagbo had said that the charges were politically motivated against him. He'd feel vindicated if the acquittal stands. Does that mean that the charges were politically motivated?
No, the charges were motivated by the evidence that the prosecutor had and that the prosecutor team believed to be sufficient, but the judges considered that they were not sufficient. The court is not a judicial body, and the charges have been confirmed before at the pretrial level by the pretrial chamber, which led to the opening of the trial, in which 82 witnesses have made their testimonies and thousands of pages of evidence has been presented. The question was whether this would be sufficient to demonstrate in the eyes of the majority of the trial chamber that Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Bleboude are responsible for the incidents with which they were charged or not.
Jean-Pierre Bemba has walked free, Jonathan. Gbagbo might be walking free. For those looking from the outside in, does it prove the credibility of the court or the weakness of the court in gathering evidence?
Yeah, before I answer your question, let me refer to what Paolina said. What I said earlier was that if the acquittal is withheld, because the prosecutor is appealing against the acquittal of Gbagbo, so if it is withheld, then the victims might not be entitled to any compensation.
Understood.
But to answer your question now, it's the ICC has already been criticized by so many African countries and even by the UK, right? Since its inception 15 years ago, it's only been able to convict, to make 3 convictions, and these 3 convictions are all rebel leaders. It has not been able to bring any conviction and convict any high-profile people, like the current president of Kenya, the current president of Kenya, and his deputy, Uhuru Kenyatta.
Yes, but Jonathan, because there's pressure. But Jonathan, because there's pressure for them to convict high-profile figures, if the evidence doesn't match, the evidence doesn't match, right? They can't do it politically in order to go for big fish.
No, but the fact is that is why the prosecution mustn't rush, right, to bring cases before the court. Okay, it must thoroughly investigate, right, and gather, credible evidence before bringing such cases to the court. Are you suggesting,
Jonathan, that the prosecution...
And in any case...
Certainly, are you suggesting that the prosecution didn't have its ducks in order or ducks in a row before it laid the charges and brought the case
from the way I see it, from the way I see it, okay, it appears to be look, since the ICC has been criticized so many times, right, that it appears to be targeting Africans, right, and neglecting the others, okay?
Sure, but isn't that's a broader debate, isn't it? That's a different debate in a way. Yes.
Yes, it is, yes. Yeah, but look, Bemba has been acquitted. Well, one guy also from Congo was acquitted, but acquitted was later overturned. Right. Okay. The point is, only since in 15 years, only 3 only 3 convictions have been made, and against minor rebel leaders. Okay. Right. So that should tell you something.
Okay. That's true. So, Paolina, looking at the charges, 4 counts of crimes against humanity, murder, rape, and other forms of sexual violence, persecution, and other inhuman acts, with a bunch of years to make their case. Paolina, was the prosecution weak in making its case?
No. Well, from what I have seen, of course, throughout the entire proceedings, I think that the prosecution had enough evidence to arrive at least at the end of a trial, meaning to continue and not to stop with this no case to answer motion. We had a lot of victims who came to testify with great courage. We had documents proving to some extent the responsibility of both accused. We have pleaded that before trial chamber. We are still convinced that the evidence presented by the prosecution at this point in time is sufficient to continue with the trial. I think it's, at the end of the day, a matter of which threshold has been applied by the majority of the two judges to assess this evidence. And this, unfortunately, we don't know yet, because the majority of the judges decided to rule on the question without delivering the full reasoning of their decision.
And Paolina, if you could give us some insights into the initial reaction from some of the victims and relatives of the victims to the news when Gbagbo was acquitted, what was it?
The first, of course, reaction was astonishment. It was really not foreseen. Of course, victims were prepared by myself too about this event, but still one thing is thinking about it theoretically, and another thing is just seeing on the video what happened on Tuesday during the hearing. There was this extreme joy on one side and sadness on the side of the victims on the other side. The words that they used when they were contacted by myself and by my team in the field, they simply said, we consider that our quest for justice was not heard at all before the International Criminal Court. They had a lot of hopes in the court, and at that point in time, great deception. They understand still that the decision is not final, so they are still hoping that the appeal chamber could finally heard their voices.
Okay. Fadi El Abdallah, Paolina Massidda and Jonathan Offei Ansah, it's been a pleasure talking to all of you. We'll keep a close eye on Gbagbo's future, but for now, thanks for joining us.